Hi, everybody. My name is Maria Isabel Angel from Colombia. I am super happy today. I have an amazing guest with me. Her name is Lisa Urkevich. She is the author of this amazing book that I have with me in Colombia that I love. I think this book is a gem, and it is a big honor to have Lisa with us. How are you, Lisa?
I'm wonderful. Thank you so much, Maria, for inviting me today.
No, I'm super happy. Since I saw this book, I bought it in Amazon. Since I saw this book, I was like, because I have been trying to research about the music and the dance and the rhythms, not only of the Arabian Peninsula, but also of other countries of the Middle East. And it's very difficult. When I saw this book and how deep it is and how huge it is, I thought, who did this? Why? How? And a woman. I was just amazed. So, Lisa, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you ended working in the Middle East, and a little bit about your career?
Well, actually, I was a professor at Boston University, and I was teaching music of the Islamic world. I had lived in Saudi Arabia for some years before that, and so I was living there, and then I got a Fulbright grant to go to Kuwait and do research. And I wanted to go back to Saudi Arabia and do more music research because it really interested me. When I was an undergrad, when I was very young, like 18, I'd studied Arabic music in college. So when I had these opportunities, I wanted to keep going. So from Boston University, I went to Kuwait. And then from there, I started to teach at a new university that opened up, the American University of Kuwait. I didn't plan on it. I just planned to come there and do research as a Fulbrighter with the US State Department. But the university opened up. They asked me to stay on. My house was still in Boston. My car, the neighbors would call and say there were squirrels that had moved into the car. These little, animals we have in America in the woods. I had to throw the car away. So it wasn't. I didn't really plan to move to the Middle East. I've been here almost 20 years now. And from there, I started teaching in the university. And I took my students back to Saudi Arabia, my Kuwaiti students, and a lot of my students in Kuwait were Saudi. And then I went up and down the Gulf states into Bahrain and Qatar and Oman and looked at all those different types of music. So just little by little, what happened was when I started to teach the class, I realized there was no book. There was no good book to teach the students. So I started to use my field notes from trips that I had taken around and the video I'd taken and my field research. And then the students would take my information and go home and say, hey, grandma, my professor's saying this. And then grandma would come back and say, oh, tell her she's wrong. That's not how we do it. And then I would say, well, bring grandma in. And grandma would come to class. And then we would start a dialogue. And then another grandma would come and argue with that grandma. And then, so it was just, but it took like 20 years because one thing I did, this area is so convoluted and confusing that it was really hard to make sense of it. And that's why it took so long, because I wanted to make sure I was accurate. The people here have been in an oral society up until 1950. Everything was transmitted orally. Their history was not written down. So I wanted to make sure whatever I wrote down was really accurate, just out of respect for my students and their families and all the people that had helped me over the years.
Exactly. And as you say, everybody has a different version. One grandma was saying something, but another grandma is going to say something different.
But here in this region, people belong to tribes. So one tribe may dance a certain way, and that's different than another tribe dances. One people, like for instance, I had students that were from, their ancestors were from Oman. They were doing certain dances at their weddings in Kuwait that Kuwaitis had never seen. And they go, we don't do that in Kuwait. And I'm like, oh yeah, you do. I've been to a lot of weddings where these certain moves are done. So people live in boxes and they didn't even know what was going on among each other.
Exactly. And also I was going to ask you about books in Arabic. Did you find at least some books like deep as yours, but in Arabic, or very soft and superficial? Not superficial, but I mean not as deep, in Arabic. Could you find these sources or not?
Well, okay, music in this region is considered sinful. A lot of people view it's haram. And so the government wasn't funding people to become musicologists and be trained in this kind of research. So that was one thing. So anything that was really written, a lot of the things that were written in about music were by journalists, or it was superficial. There were one or two people who really got deeper, but because they weren't educated, they weren't formally educated, like in the 70s, their books didn't really, they didn't know what to focus on or what to do. So I can't say, there are some Arab scholars who did some wonderful work, but what I found is like pockets of their work was really a gem. Not the whole thing as a whole was kind of convoluted, but pockets of it were great. And then there were people like Tarq Abdul Hakim in Saudi Arabia, who was a more serious scholar, but he wasn't really celebrated during his lifetime for the research he had done as much as he should have been. So, so it just kind of depended on which country and what's going on. But there were books in Arabic, but mostly because nobody was going to fund them. And if you said, I'm going to go to college to become a doctor of music, nobody, your family may never talk to you again. You know, it was very shameful. So that caused this big void here. And I was just like, you know, there was really a need for that research.
Mm-hmm. You know, I thought that it was just about the dance, you know, that they will say, no, if you dance, no. See? But I thought that music was respected, you know, nowadays that you can have a career as a musician, maybe singing, composing, or playing an instrument. But so no, you're saying no, that if this is something that the families, they don't motivate the sons and the daughters to become professional musicians.
It's changed. It's changed over the years because there are people from good families who have become musicians, but a lot, no. I mean, I was talking to a young man. He became, in music, they were starting to offer music in public schools in Kuwait, so out in the rural area. And he's like, I love this girl, but her family will never let her marry me because I'm teaching music at the school, or I play music at night, so there is a stigma attached to it for a woman. It's incredible. Mm-hmm. I mean, a great shame, and you're one step away from, you know, prostitution and things. But it depends. If you're a really big star, people respect that, like Nawal al-Kuwaiti or somebody like that. But she went through a lot of struggles. I mean, they all do. It's very difficult for women.
Exactly. For me, it's like incredible because when I see, for example, the big singers that you say, or Kulthum, for example, in the Arab world, I say, what happened? Why before the music and the singing and of a woman was so recognized and appreciated in that moment of time? What happened? The Islamic and it got more, the pressure increased, or what happened that before it was a profession that was very celebrated and then not?
Well, in Kuwait, it wasn't celebrated in Saudi Arabia. I mean, never. The only woman to really have her voice recorded was Ibtisam Lotfi, and that was because she was friends with a powerful minister, and that was in the 70s and 80s. And then she was banned. And then, you know, so there's these waves of extremism, of Islamic extremism, or I don't want to say Islamic, but just religious extremism that you'll find. And so what we found was like a lot of women in the 70s and 80s, even Kuwait, when television was starting to be produced, went on TV and the government said, we support you, we back you. And then the Iraq war came and a lot of people fled to Saudi Arabia and they made pacts with God. Like, I promise if you save my family, save my home, I'll never listen to music again, you know, because music was like, it's still considered a little naughty. And so they came back more conservative than they had been in the 70s and 80s. In the 90s, you know, women started to wear headscarves that they had never before and so forth. So it depends on the country and the time and place. Right now, Saudi Arabia is really starting to open up. It's completely different. But other places are still, you know, even if you say it's okay, you know, it's like, no, I don't know, you know, not my daughter, kind of stay away from that, parents might say.
Exactly. So talking about you as a woman in the Middle East, trying to do this research, how was it, you know, in an Islamic area? How was this? The people were like, yes, go ahead. They opened the doors for you, you know, as a dream, as a fantasy, they opened the doors. Or did you find a lot of challenges?
The people I deal with are serious musicians. They're folk musicians or they're classical musicians. They play. So there's different types of music. You know, there's music of the people where anybody can jump in and sing. But normally the people that play the instruments are professionals, drums. And it tends to be, in folk music, it tends to be drums. And there's also art music where you play a more sophisticated instrument like the oud, where you have to understand maqam and melodic modes. And then there's incoming arts, like African arts, like tambor and so forth. So there's different categories of music. And then Khaliji pop, which is a commercial music. And that's a fourth category. So, but when I came, the people I'm dealing with are serious, they're professional, and they were happy that they were getting recognition, that an American, a researcher came and wanted to validate what they did and not say it's tawdry party drinking music, but that what you're doing is really of significance, and we're going to teach it in a university. The course that I was teaching was the first that was taught in any major university featuring the Arabian Peninsula. So they were really happy about that. And also by doing that, I was kind of making them famous, because a lot of times I would show video and talk about a performer, and then the students like, oh, I want her at my wedding. I want that band at my wedding. So the bands would start to call me and say, we're getting a lot of jobs, you know, like because we've been validated. So in a way that it really worked out. In places, I remember, like I went to Taif, I was interviewing the musicians, and that was before the current government. And they, in Saudi Arabia, it's in Western Saudi Arabia up in the mountains. And they said, you know, I interviewed them and did all the videos with it. I used to live there actually for years. And they said, please tell them about us. Go back and talk to the press. Would you please tell them about us? You know, because we're trying to tell the country, the government, whoever, the press, that we're important, and nobody cares. But maybe if a foreigner comes in, which is wrong, obvious, you know, but that's kind of the, but so no, people were nice to me. And they were welcoming to me.
Mm-hmm. And you didn't have, for example, any problem with the government? Because sometimes you see that when a foreigner is trying to do a research, they stop you or they want to censor. So you didn't find this issue?
There have always been problems. I've always found myself in situations I you know, be out in the middle of the night and it's like 500 men, just very strange, you know, just whatever, just weird situations. So I've always, but as far as, and if they ever had any issues, it was people that would come to watch the music events, not the musicians themselves. So it was the audience or the people that were coming to the party. So, and because some of these events are held late at night and stuff like that. But as for the government, they were, like when I went through, I did a big research tour of Saudi Arabia a couple times, but the last one was like 2015 or one in 2011, and the government actually sent people to follow me, especially because I was down near the Yemen border, and there were attacks on foreigners, on Westerners, and they just didn't want any incidents. So I was with a guardian. In those days, women couldn't drive, and I had to have somebody with me. It was an older man who came with me. He worked for me, but he was my guardian. And he would say, look behind us, you know, in the car, look behind us, and you'd see the sirens. And he goes, I remember he said, that's a national police officer. In front of us, who was escorting us into town, was a local police officer. And then he said there was a state officer that was also with us. So it was three. I'm a musicologist, so I thought I had three policemen, three police cars with me to enter this town. It was very unusual. But they were trying to just make sure it was safe.
Exactly. At least they were trying to protect you and not trying to, you know, or censor you or limit you, you know. So, okay. So about these music traditions that you found in the area, you say that they were transmitted orally. So this is still happening. Are these these tribes or these groups trying to preserve, trying to write about them or document about it? Or maybe, I don't know if you have folk groups that they teach in some place or not at all. Like, for example, here in Colombia, we have folk teachers, folk dance teachers, and folk music teachers also. And we try to preserve, we teach this in the universities. So, because of course, this is an entire complete area of the world. How is done? How are these groups trying to keep alive the traditions?
It depends on the country, but it's bad. The situation's bad. We tried, you know, through some colleagues, and to open a center, an Arabian Heritage Center, and we did it for about 7 years, but it's not enough. Now in Saudi Arabia, it's opened up, but they're more into marketing the culture than because it's not fun and attractive to sit and do that kind of documentation and archiving and preservation on that kind of detail. So there's more of a marketing of taking sort of like a simple dance, and then putting it up on big posters and so forth, rather than this kind of library science work and so forth. So it's not good. And when my students, I remember when I first started teaching, I would ask the boys, how many of you can dance the Arda, which is the traditional sword dance, and it would be 90% of the class. And then, last semester, maybe 15%. So there's globalization that's impacting the region. There's the sense that young people, so many people in this region are under the age of 35 or young, and they view anything Western is cool and fun and modern. And why do I want to be old-fashioned and do that old-fashioned stuff? They've been taking auto tunes. They have been taking some traditional songs and then just plastering them with auto tunes. These are called Shayla, these types of songs. And just destroying the maqamat, the melodic mode systems, by using these Western software programs. I mean, it's not. I wouldn't recommend what's happening, to help if we want to preserve and help save this culture. And it's really important because especially Saudi Arabia, because it's still so pristine. People still sing these songs. People still do these dances. There's a lot of rural people. It's a big country, and a lot of people in villages and out in the desert and so forth that maintain these traditions. So it's so precious if they could be preserved and recorded and properly studied, properly taught. It's just a wonderful opportunity. So hopefully, things are moving, but hopefully they'll move in that direction. But right at this exact moment in time, it's not going fast enough for me, at least.
Exactly. For example, I have a question. You're working right now in the University of Kuwait, in the American University of Kuwait, or you are teaching somewhere else?
I'm at the American University of Kuwait, but right now I'm in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia today.
Exactly. So my question is that, are there other universities in the area that are teaching music, or only in the American University of Kuwait?
Yeah, okay. Well, in Kuwait, there's a Higher Institute of Musical Arts. So there's a government school. It's a music college. To the extent that they teach traditional arts, everybody learns some rhythms and so forth. I'm not in that system, but my understanding is it's not as extensive as it could be or should be. They're learning piano still, and they do learn oud, but a lot of times it's Egyptian oud. So there's a couple other music schools in the area. There's private teachers around the area, but there's nothing that's organized on a bigger scale, and that people could get access to all that data.
Exactly. So was the first course very organized and deep about music of the region?
Well, what's my understanding, it was the first course at a college, at a liberal arts college, not at a music school, because like at a music academy, they may have taught like how to play the drums of, certain. This is different. This was, well, you can tell from the book, it was just kind of, how do we contextualize this? Because that was one thing, even living here, I lived here for 4 years in the 90s, and I kept going, wait, I don't understand how to make sense of this music. Why do people use that word, and then they use that word, and it's two different things? And why does this, and why is that? I was so confusing. And it took just a really long time and a lot of travel to go, oh, and also my experience as a musicologist in Western music, right? Because I understood how these systems worked. And then it started to click. Like, oh, now I get it. Now I see where this is connected and how this works and how it all fits together. And it's a huge ecosystem. So that took a really long time. But when it hit, I was like, wow. I remember saying to myself, when I write in the book, I'm like, wow, I wish I'd have known this. I wish I'd known this 20 years ago. My life would have been easier when I walked in this country.
Mm-hmm, completely. So, for example, moving on to the area of women in the traditions, in the musical traditions or the dance traditions. Is the presence of women powerful, abundant, or is decreasing with the time and with the perhaps Islamic pressure or Western pressure or whatever? So in the musical traditions that you found, women have a star, how can I say, role, that like a shiny role, or just is in decline right now? How is this?
Well, women perform music more than men, right? Because women have wedding parties, and at wedding parties you have to have, they're segregated. It's only women, and the band are women, and I remember going to a music party in Jeddah back in the 90s, and there was a woman playing rock drum and a woman on a violin, and it's just like dentists. You had a lot of women dentists because only a woman dentist could work on women. So in a way, that segregation helps promote music. And but what happened, and up until like 1950, if you were going to have a wedding party, the women themselves would perform. The mothers, the sisters, they would come out and clap and sing, and they were your music, right? Then what happened is the private space became more public with oil wealth and mass media and so forth. So people that were coming to your wedding weren't your family. And when that started to happen, you started to hire professional musicians called the gaga. They were drumming women. And these women tended to come from African heritage, because to perform in public for money was considered very lowbrow. So these people came from slave ancestors of slaves, because women of the tribes would not perform music and instruments in public anymore. So that kind of gave a market to these performing women, these Dagaga women, and that was like, kind of frowned upon. And then when commercial music came in the 70s and 80s, well, money could be made. You started to get Persian women could perform, Iraqi women could perform, Yemeni women, because you weren't from this neighborhood, so that you didn't have that same stigma or that same shame. And now, it's people. Some families are trying to be practical, like this is a job and it's money, and they're being more open with it. But I remember interviewing an older Dagaga lady, and she said, "We have girls that sing at the wedding parties from the tribes. They're Arab women from tribes, but they totally cover." And she said, if their families found out, they would kill them. This was like 15 years ago. They would kill that. I don't think that would be the case today, but that's how bad it was, But she said they need money. They have big names, the names of big tribes, but the girls are poor and they needed money, so they sing at weddings. But it's very dangerous.
Mm-hmm. Of course, of course. So about the most amazing finding that you could see during the research, what was this that just amazed you? That I think that you have many stories, many adventures, and all the people that you met, and the instruments and the rituals that you saw. But what just boom, get you to your heart? What was so surprising, so amazing?
What got to my heart is the people were wonderful. They're just wonderful. I mean, everybody, I interviewed everybody I worked, I grew to love them very much. And to this day, I have these, they're like my brothers or my sisters or my sons or my daughters, to this day, that I didn't know I would have such an affinity for these people, how kind they were, how Islamic culture is so much, in a way, like Christian culture, in the sense that a good person has the same values as a good person. A good Muslim is the same values as a good Christian. And I remember, just so many things like that. And when you first come here in the 90s, and you see women in black, you think, for me, of nuns, which I was afraid of nuns, and you think, oh, they must be super religious and they're nuns. And you kind of have to change, get over all of these weird stereotypes you have and feelings you have, and go, this isn't the case. Whatever you're thinking, it's not the case at all. Or to think that because there was segregation, that men hated women, that they hated women. And I thought, oh no, they like women too much. It wasn't that they hated them, at all. So there were so many things I found that I was like, oh, that, because the stereotype in the West is like, oh, you must hate women, you're making them dress like this and whatever. But that wasn't what I found it. At least not most of the time.
Exactly. And talking about those myths, those everybody says, no, it was like this, and then you found, no, it's not like this. This is complete the opposite. I mean, in the music or in the dance, what did you find? Which myths did you just unveil?
Well, there wasn't that much written about the music to begin with that I had anything to compare it with, except, the readings, like St. Jean Philby, the explorer who lived here in the early 1920s, he said, this is a musicless land. And I just thought, wow, that's not true at all. There's so much music. These women go to wedding parties every night, they dance, they sing, they play drums, and the men have these events all the time where they're playing oud. Even now in Kuwait, they have music called adani, and in Riyadh too, where the guys are out at night. And one thing is, in the Western world, we're kind of passive. Music happens to us. We play our headphones, and we don't create it. But here, people still sing and play instruments and have parties where they perform, at night regularly. It's just a common thing to do. So that was surprising, that music was still alive in an active way, not just a passive way.
Super, super interesting. So, talking about a music and a dance that is common, perhaps, in all the Arabian Peninsula. You mentioned before about the Khaliji or the pop, Khaliji pop. What can you tell us about this? And maybe if you find any other, how can I say, common tradition between all the peninsula?
Well, the Khaliji pop is mostly from the Emirates up. So we wouldn't say like it came from Oman or Yemen or something like that. And you do find artists like from Iraq who are singing that style. You find women singing Khaliji pop who are from the North African countries, Tunisia and Morocco and so forth. Their accent is very good. They know how to pronounce the Khaliji dialect. Now, Khaliji pop's sort of a misnomer because if you live in Saudi Arabia, you don't call that music Khaliji. Khaliji means Gulf. Well, you're from the Red Sea. You're not from the Gulf. And you're not going to call it Khaliji. You're from, Saudi. They call it Saudi pop or whatever regional style it's going to be. So, but the reason people think of it's Khaliji pop is because all the money, the royal families are on the Gulf because the oil's found, Aramco is in the East Coast and the royal family's in central Saudi Arabia. Then there's this big mountain chain called the Hejaz. And a lot of the artists, we would say our early Khaliji artists, actually came from the West. They didn't come from the East. They didn't come from where the oil wealth was. They came from places less wealthy. They had to learn the accent of the Eastern people in order to sell that music because all the money was in the East. And that's why that music became kind of dominant because that's where the oil money was. But the great artists, Muhammad Abdu and all these people are from the West, not from the East.
Super interesting. So, talking about this Khaliji pop that you mentioned, there are different styles because you mentioned maybe according to the area or the influence or the background of each musicians. Because you can listen, for example, when I play a song that I think that is a Khaliji pop, but the rhythms are so different from another Khaliji pop that I think is Khaliji pop, but the rhythms are super different, and the feeling is different. So, can you explain to us this difference between like this genre?
Okay, the thing that makes it Khaliji pop and not folk music or traditional music is it was commercial. It was sold and it was disseminated through radio or internet or records or tapes or whatever. That was completely different than, like we said, people performing music themselves for themselves and so forth. So there was this shift when you went from being active to less more passive, being an active performance of music to more passive. And so what happened when it first came out, each country had their own little style. And one thing that was determined, because they went back and forth through different transformation. Now, I argue that this Khaliji pop was really founded in Kuwait because Saudi musicians were forbidden from really singing and recording in Saudi Arabia. So they all came to the recording studios of Kuwait in the 80s, 70s, and 80s. Muhammad Abdu, for instance, first recorded in Kuwait. And what they decided to do, they started also adding like an Egyptian style. And then once musicians from the region started to sing with an Egyptian accent, they were shut down. No, you can do a lot with music, but you can't alter the dialect. So for a song traditionally to be called Khaliji pop, it has to have a dialect from the Arabian Peninsula. So you can't sing with Egyptian accent, you can't sing with Jordanian, you can't do that. And so when in the early days, Saudis would sing with a Saudi accent and they would use more frame drums. Kuwaitis would use, Kuwaiti words, they turn the J into Y and so forth. And they would play, sharbuka, a lot of hand clapping. That was their style. In the Emirates, you'll see songs like Booyah, Booyah, Daddy, Daddy. Booyah is a word you're never going to hear in Kuwait, but you'd hear it in the Emirates. So people kept dialect from their region and the rhythms. That was the rule. You can do whatever you want in this music, add violins, add electric guitar, but you keep rhythms and you keep the dialect, the accent. Then that just started to change. And now you hear Latino rhythms, right? Or Latinx rhythms, whatever, in the Khaliji music. And you'll hear they created a dialect called white language, which is general for the entire peninsula, not for the specific countries, not Kuwait or Saudi or Bahrain or whatever. So now, like people from Tunisia, these women singers from Tunisia will sing it's called white language. it's Khaliji enough. And it might use a couple rhythms from the old days of the pearl divers or from the Bedouin, but it's like now really everything goes. Even my students came in the other day with a piece, and it sounded like so Spanish. And then the singer started singing, and he had this Khaliji accent, and then we all burst out laughing, like, it's Khaliji.
Exactly. This is what why sometimes it's confusing. It's very confusing because you will think that I don't know, like you have these rhythms and you have this like the way that they sing, the accent, and you will know, okay, this is I can do this specific type of dance. But when they start mixing, it's very confusing because now it's like I don't know if this is like it comes from the south, like I mean, or Pakistan or India, or this is coming from Spain, or this is coming from Egypt. So how me as a dancer, how I'm going to dance this? Sometimes it's very, very confusing.
And I was talking to a composer of Khaliji pop songs, and he said to me, and I said, let's talk about the categories, because in pop music you have hip hop, you have rap, you have different categories, East Coast, West Coast. I said, let's talk about the different specific categories of Khaliji pop, and he said, that's the problem, we don't have them. So that's why we can't perfect them. If we had clear categories, this is reggaeton or whatever, then you could go in and really perfect it and make it. But we don't have this. It's just like people in their bedroom just coming up with what they come up with. And he kind of lamented that fact, and he wished that it was more organized and the system was more structured.
Exactly, because if you put them in categories, maybe you can, and also each category can grow, and be super rich, and different from another ones, and it will be less confusing. And also, for example, about the rhythms, because many of these rhythms, as you say, for example, here in Latin America, we have from the just from the Gulf, maybe it is common here the adani, but sometimes a teacher teaches, okay, the adani is like doom, doom, tak, and that's it. Then another teacher just tells us, no, it's not like that. You have to add a tag or a decoration or something like this. So it's a little bit confusing, but also because many of the rhythms of the area are polyrhythms. So how can you write them? Which is the lead instrument? How can you spell them? If a drum is doing this, another drum is doing this. For example, in Egyptian music, it's kind of easy because you have the maksum, dum tak, tak dum tak. You can write it, no problem. Many variations, yes, but the essence is there. But when you have a polyrhythm, if you are listening, what are you going to write? Because everybody maybe can be hit by different sounds, maybe more tags. So can you explain us about the presence of polyrhythms in the music?
Okay. Well, first, Adani, let me go back to Adani. Adani is a big category with many rhythms, maybe 100 rhythms, and really complicated. And it comes from the Yemen, and Adani is a misnomer too. It should be called Hadrami because that sound comes from the Hadramaut region of the Yemen. But the rhythms, the Peninsula rhythms are really famous. Even in the old days, that was one thing Egyptian musicians would say, we can't play, Muhammad Abdu's playing. Okay, we can provide the orchestra, we can do everything, but bring the drummers from the Peninsula because we can't play those rhythms because they're polyrhythmic. And the roots, I argue in my book, are from Africa because most of a great deal of the polyrhythms come out of these African communities that were slaves. They were working in date palm groves, and they were, really famous drummers throughout the Arabian Peninsula. And so polyrhythm was really common in Africa. And then tribes started to, like the Dosari tribe and other tribes, started to really adopt these, could be thousands of years ago. So the way the polyrhythm, you write each part, it's, at itself, like we would in Western music, and then they're just simultaneous. But it's tricky because this person could be in 4/4 time and that person's in 3/4 time. And so that's what makes the beats jump, which is pretty cool, But as a dancer, what you follow, I don't know. I couldn't tell you which beat you would want to follow. But
Exactly. So yeah, I think they are super interesting. As you say, very rich. Because one instrument is doing this, another instrument is doing this, and what you say, sometimes they have to bring the drummers, or in the old days they had to bring the drummers because who was going to play this? And in the world of Oriental dance, now is very common. Like, for example, when you have a music piece for a dancer, a mejanse, for example, they can put rhythms from the golf, but they put this, as I told you, doom, doom, tak, doom, doom, or something very similar, and that's it, play by the darbuka. So
Right.
okay, so super interesting, and it will be, and I know in your book we have many rhythms, and I think another book is out there, by Tarek Yamani. I think he was very inspired about your book, and he did a very short but very nice rhythm book about the books of the Arabian Peninsula, also inspiring your work. I don't know if
Yeah,
you
he came to visit me and he asked me for help. And yes, I remember him.
It's interesting because I love seeing people, and for me as a teacher, as a student also, it's so nice when I can find material, to compare, to just like think, okay, this is okay, this is not okay, or just to be inspired. So, as if we have a lot of information, is sometimes it's confusing, but sometimes it helps our research also. So talking also about this, that is very a lot is very present in the Oriental dance world, this word Raqs al-Nashat, as a hair dance, because we have so many myths around this, about the tobe, about the movements, about the expressions, about the styles, because it depends of the, maybe the country, because not only one country is doing Raqs al-Nashat, but maybe different. So can you give us some light about this Raqs al-Nashat?
In Kuwait or Saudi Arabia, I've never heard that term, but I've heard in the Emirates people use it, but I don't know if they're using it because it came back from the dancers of the West, so I don't know if it's cyclic. The hair dance, it's a move that's part of but we call the dance Badawi, Bedouin dance, or sometimes it's called Faris. Faris means mare, female horse. So a woman is a horse. And so she's showing off, she's arrogant, right? You don't want to show your teeth, you don't smile, and you have your nostrils flare. You put your bum up in the air, you arch your back, because that's your tail. Arabian horses, their tail goes up, and you're arrogant. The reason this happens, okay, at a wedding party, traditionally, and among Bedouin people, that means people of the desert, not people who had settled in the cities. Although settled people will do Badawi dance. So what happened is the older women will sit in the front of the wedding. There's like a big open area. In Kuwait, it looks like it's like the dance floor, but the girls move in a racetrack. They kind of go like this. But in Saudi, you just kind of move like a normal dance. So the older ladies are in the front, and maybe one of them has a son that needs a wife. Well, your mother says, get down there and dance. So you're on display in front of the older ladies. So what you'll do is you take off your shoes, you go down there, and you start to do this Badawi dance. It's like a skip. It's like a bit of a gallop because you're a horse, right? I mean, it's based on this concept of the horse, or Faris, mare. You're a mare. Or some people say you're riding the horse. You're the warrior woman on top of the horse. Other people say you're the horse. It depends on the tribe. So you're doing that, and then you stop in the middle, and you put your hand here, and you're showing off your henna and your bling, and you've got any gold. And then you're going to do the dance. So whether you do a figure 8, whether you do up and down, whether you do 2 left to the right, depends on your tribe. You're Shimri, you're Atabi, which tribe? Why are you doing that? Because I'm showing those old ladies that I'm healthy. Look, I have good nutrients. We have good food. I take care of myself. You wash your hair in camel's urine in the old days, and it wasn't good. You couldn't just put the bowl of urine on. Oh no, you have to stick your head under the camel to get proper hair care. So while you're doing your dance, which is really hard, and you get dizzy and you could fall over. So you have to be athletic. You have to be healthy to do Badawi dance. I used to time the girls, a Badawi dance, the music lasts 3 to 4 minutes, but the girls were like dropping out 15, 20 seconds. There was stuff like that. So while you're doing your dance and showing off your hair, look, I have long, beautiful hair. Your mother is standing up, and your sisters, your grandma, and they're clapping like this, right? So all the women in the hall can look, oh, that's her mother. You want to marry that girl? She belongs to me, right? And then she's done and sits down, and the next one comes up. So the dance is a competition, and the hair, showing off your hair, is just really showing off your health, your nutrients.
That is so different from what we have, and because we think it's super soft, just like charming, soft, very feminine, but it's also feminine, but it's like it's powerful. It's powerful, and it's saying, "Look, I'm healthy. I'm strong enough. I'm athletic enough. I take care of myself." So super, super, super interesting. This is something that, for example, I never heard that explanation before.
Yeah, it took me a long time too, because I also, for years, and then the Bedouin ladies all said, well, yeah, of course you know why we do that. I'm like, no. And then, it wasn't just one, it was 50, 60 of them are all.
Exactly.
Yeah, and the hand move, there's a move you can do toward yourself or away. Towards, I want a husband. So away is, I'm just dancing for fun. So I had a student, I remember this, and she was dancing her Badawi at the wedding, and she's all winded, and she comes back, and she says, Grandma, what do you think? My Badawi's pretty great, right? And Grandma grabs her by her long Bedouin hair and pulls her down. Said, what are you doing? You stupid. You're stupid. She said, what, Grandma? I look nice. She goes, what you doing with your hand? She said, I don't know. I'm just dancing. She goes, you go like this. You get a husband. You go like this. You're never getting a husband. So she went back. She said 3 weddings. She changed her hand move like this. She got a husband. It worked.
It worked for her.
It worked, yeah.
Okay, so, and for example, about these hair movements that you say, but maybe with the Khaliji pop music, this is what we see right now in the dance scene. That with Khaliji pop, you can do the hair dances. Is this something that is common there? Is something that is not common? How do you dance this Khaliji pop?
Okay, the Khaliji, no, it depends on the rhythm. Now, there's certain rhythms, and the people complain. There's a rhythm called Bandari. It comes out of the Emirates, and the people complain, we can't dance our Khaliji dance. Khaliji dance is just like a little 2-step skip thingy. But Saudis have more upper body movement when they do it, and the Kuwaitis do less. But they're more serpentine. But the Kuwaitis just kind of do the feet move. So the question is, can you do your hair toss to it? Yeah, I mean, people do. They stop and do it anytime. But it's traditionally, it was really from Bedouin, not for Khaliji pop. And other girls who would do Khaliji pop didn't really do that. But you can do anything you want now, right? There's Iraqi dances. Iraqi music's really popular in the weddings now, and people will do Iraqi dances, from the Peninsula. But Egyptian belly dance, only one. You can never do more than one at a wedding party, because then you're showing off too much. And I remember one young woman said, we work on it our whole lives. That's the one dance, that's the dance when we get married. We're going to do that dance for our husband, and that's the one dance we really want to shine in the wedding party, is that Egyptian dance. But you're only going to do one because Grandma yell at you. You do more.
Exactly. So, for example, what do you see in the clubs or in the weddings, for example, when they put Khaliji pop, how the guys, they dance, and how the women, how they dance? They are still dancing, for example, in a wedding in separate groups. Is this still going on, or it is mixed already, or it has to be the group of the women, the group of the guys, and when they listen to this Khaliji pop, how they dance?
Oh, I've never. If men at a wedding, very rare. It's not a traditional. It's not probably not the weddings I go to. It's always women, always segregated, and women just do that shuffle. And like I said, the Kuwaitis do it like a racetrack. You go down and around and around, and then the old ladies are watching you like that, because you're all dressed up. And the Saudis will do it more mingled. Like sometimes their weddings will have tables. You sit at tables, but Kuwaitis, it's more like it's tiered seating, and you just look down at the girls dancing, and all the lights it's bright, normally. And guys dance differently, and they like to dance like to the different Adani beats you'll find, or in the Hijaz, they'll dance to those Hijazi songs. It's a different type of dance than the shuffle, the little foot, the subtle, that more subtle shuffle.
Okay, so talking about the tradition and how these different countries are trying to keep the traditions alive, is the government doing something, like they fund at least something, the work, the research, the shows, folk dance congress or folk music congress, something that they are like motivating people to write, research, protect, preserve for the future the music and dance traditions of the area, or not?
Not yet. I'm hoping. I mean, I communicate with different entities a lot, and I try to tell them the significance of this. When you have very small percentage of the people over the age of 69, they're going to be dead soon. And it's really important that these traditions. But one good thing we can say is people videotape their weddings. So somewhere out there, all over the peninsula, are videos of dancing. So not necessarily on YouTube, but it's in private collections. And so one day, we may not have as many people explaining to us what's going on. Like, there was an older woman, she's from the Shimri tribe, and I remember she said you would take your foot like a horse and prance, and she showed me, like, you would rub your toe, against the dirt, and she said that was a famous move of the Shimri, but people like her are dying, and to learn those meaning and which tribe does what and why it's. But hopefully, I'm hoping that within the next 10 years, especially because we're seeing, a lot of activity going on in this region. Vision 2030, also Kuwait has a vision, and all the countries have these new visions. I'm hoping that that's something that, rather than just marketing, that they really try to get into preservation.
Exactly, because otherwise it will die, and it's so rich. It's so rich. It's like when I was reading your book, it's like your mind explodes because everything is so rich, so diverse. The music, the instruments, and the dances, and the dance steps, and the dance, just the feelings and the expressions is so diverse that it will be a pity that this all dies in 1 or 2 or 3 generations.
I agree. I really agree. I mean, I have hope, though. We're working on it. I'm in Riyadh right now, trying to talk to some people. So hopefully.
Exactly. I was going there. So right now, what's your next project? What are you doing right now? Are you planning to continue the research, or maybe did you find a topic of your interest in that you are writing perhaps about, or how can we see you also maybe in social media or visiting your website? How can people know more about your book and yourself?
Well, through my website, there's information, and I'm working on 2 projects. One is the history of Khaliji pop music, where it came from, because I think it's really important, because that also is, like we were just saying, splintering up. So if we can kind of get a history and see where it came from and who is the important people in that, and the composers and so forth. So I'm working on a book on that, and then also a book on those, a CD and book on those early recordings from the early 20th century, the earliest recordings of the peninsula that were discovered in the Leiden collection. I'm working on those. I had taken those back to some of the old people and had them listen to try to identify the songs and things. I did that for a few years. So hopefully we can get more information on that out to the public.
Super interesting. I mean, both of them, and the Khaliji pop, because it's so confusing.
Yeah.
So that will be super interesting. So thank you so much, Lisa. I don't know if you want to say the last words. How do you want to just say goodbye to everybody and invite everybody also to check your work?
Yeah, well, first, I just want to thank you, Maria, and how I'm so impressed by your questions and the depth of your knowledge. It's really wonderful that people like you are out there, and then you're involved with dancing. You're doing all that you're doing. So I think I just want to end with thanks to you and to everything that you've been doing.
Thank you so much. No, thank you so much. Thank you for your time, because I know you're pretty busy. Thank you for accepting an invitation from a girl from Colombia. I know it's weird, and you have, this book, I know is strange because it's odd, because I am in Colombia. I have your book next to me. So no, it was a pleasure. It was an honor. So everybody, this is her book, is Music and Traditions of the Arabian Peninsula. Please, this is a gem, everybody. I'm going to put the link of the book where you can purchase it. It's just a treasure. It is a gem. So Lisa, thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Maria. Have a good day.
Okay, so thank you, everybody. I hope that you really enjoy this chat, this conversation. It was so deep, so interesting, so colorful. So thank you, everybody, for watching. Okay, and I will see you in another opportunity. Thank you, of course, Lisa. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.